Hey everyone, my name is Francisco. This is Latin Entertainment, and welcome to Conversamos. Today's episode is on Trans-Latinx and Communindad. What are the stories, impact, and activism that goes on in the Trans-Latinx community in the US and Puerto Rico? We hope you enjoy this episode of Conversamos.
Yeah, yo, is it that wrong? I'm making a song, I'm taking it back for the platform that I formed. Music's helping me transform. I run the reservoir, the predator.
What's your Trans-Latinx story?
Well, my Trans-Latinx story is that I'm a transgender woman living in San Juan, Puerto Rico. My dad is Mexican and my mom is Puerto Rican. So I've been going back and forth from Mexico and Puerto Rico. So I've had experiences living here in Puerto Rico and living in Mexico too. I think that being trans has been difficult in a machista society because we know Latin American culture is really machista. But besides that, I'm grateful for having a supportive family. My dad is a minister, but he supports me fully. And I do a lot of work here in the community. I have a support group that we've been going on Zoom meetings twice a week during the pandemic. We can't see each other physically, but 2 times a week we see each other via Zoom, and we've been bonding over our experiences as trans people here in Puerto Rico during this pandemic. And I like to help other trans people. It helps me learn more about myself and just feel like I have a purpose on this earth.
Well, I want to start thanking Sulma Olivera Vega, Nikki Guarinara, which was the person who invited me here, and Tania Gabriela, which is another folk that lent me her house and her internet connection so I can be here with you. So I wanted to start it off with that because being trans in Puerto Rico is having a network and a community of people behind you and helping you all the way, because there's no other way to make it here if it's not creating and sustaining our communities. I'm a Black, queer, non-binary person from Arroyo, Puerto Rico, which is a little town in the south of Puerto Rico. So there's no trans people, there's no visibility of our experiences, of our stories. So I grew up thinking there was nobody like me. And so when I get to the university, it was the first time I was allowed to be myself, because I moved 3 hours away from my home. And over there, I started my activism. It started with having free and public education for all of us, and it continued towards making our movements more inclusive, more safe for our trans Black queer bodies. And to me, my Trans-Latinx experience, being as someone that has lived in the United States too, being Black in the United States is a whole different story when you're Latino too, because you're in this duality of where you are not Black enough because you don't speak English, and you're not Latino enough because you're Black. So it was the first time that I come into terms with that. So when I came back to Puerto Rico, that truly changed my whole view in how racism is rooted in our country, in which you don't even notice it, because it's not that you don't notice it, but people don't want to talk about it. People want to be like, no, we are all the same. But when you see as a Black queer, your opportunities are not the same. It's been a beautiful experience, getting to organizing our country, getting to know beautiful people like Tacha and her amazing work within our communities, and just getting the opportunity to talk about what the trans people are doing in Puerto Rico, outside of Puerto Rico, is a great opportunity that we truly appreciate, because our system, our political system, has us rooted in a sense of feeling worthless or feeling like we're not good enough. So through this movement, through these voices, through sharing our stories, it's become our politics. So I would say that my Trans-Latin experience, more than my identity and gender identity, has been about our politics as a community.
Yeah, Colombians are very machista as well. I did have spent some time there. Then I grew up in New Jersey, in the Newark area, right by Newark Airport. And so there's a lot of immigrant communities, very religious communities. So I think that was a huge impact on how free I felt to be myself. I first came out just as bisexual when I was like 16, and then I got sent to reparative therapy by my parents. So it wasn't until I started finding spaces outside my little town, and outside like my parents' control, that I was able to explore gender. So I wasn't able to come out as trans until like I was 20, because I wasn't even allowed to experiment with gender first. So, and then I I started organizing. Then I realized that I started organizing and realized like the levels of privilege I had growing up, particularly internet access and access to sites like Tumblr. I think these websites were like so crucial for me to not feel alone. And for me to start understanding what being trans was before I even identified as trans. Then I started organizing, and then I realized how little attention LGBTQ issues outside the United States get. How the LGBTQ community in the United States is so focused on themselves. Um, so in the last 4 years, I've started helping trans migrants, fundraising for the trans migrant. Um, um, they were marching from Guatemala and Honduras all the way up to the Tijuana border, and also Nogales. So I think that's when I realized that my true passion's like on making myself useful for people outside the country, because the LGBTQ organizing world in the United States is very elitist and classist, and I find that it's definitely looking outside that I find myself the most useful.
And hearing your stories, I see parallels in mine with your stories too. I've lived in both United States and Mexico, especially Tijuana, for years and years and years and years. That's kind of where I began my transition back in the mid '80s. Tijuana and San Diego, but largely Tijuana. And I also can claim that I've benefited from privileges. I can legally cross the border back and forth. I'm a U.S. citizen. You know, whenever I've had to live in the United States or access services here, I've been able to easily. Yet, of course, many in my community, trans, LGBT, HIV, in Tijuana, they cannot, our migrant community also, they cannot easily cross the border. And so, cognizant of that, I have felt that it's important that I be helpful using my privileges. And so I like what I hear from several of you, that you have the experience of more than one culture, more than one country, and that I think Danya mentioned that having that experience has given her more perspective. And so I like that. I'll stay with that.
Trans-Latinx activist Ariane Manzanares has shared that her existence is breaking the establishment. So what comes to mind when hearing about this perspective?
Well, I think that every trans person's experience in sort of a way, once we become visible, breaks the establishment, because we go against so many norms that are established. And every time, for example, every time I go out to the street, I see people looking at me, people questioning what I am. And I feel like once I just leave my house, I'm already breaking the establishment. I'm already making people question the concept of gender and what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And I think that in our activist work, we are constantly pushing barriers. Here in Puerto Rico, at least this year, they've murdered five trans people. And it's been like eye-opening seeing how many people don't even know we exist, don't know the things we go through. And sadly, like, even when they're killing us, we're breaking the establishment, we're changing the perspective of the way people see us.
And to me, like, in the dictionary, break literally means separate or cause to separate into pieces, interrupt. And to me, breaking the establishment means to see the parts, to see ourselves, to reconfigure, and at times destroy, to interrupt violence and power, to free ourselves. So I subscribe what Natasha said, even in life and death, we're breaking the establishments because we're showing pieces of our society that are not visible because they're trying to make us into something that we're not. So for me, it literally means breaking into pieces. We are showing ourselves, we're telling our stories, we are building up power from within, from what we have been through, for what we live. And that a little bit is a contrast to this narrative that it's beautiful too, but that comes from academia, that it tries in a little bit to define everything that we're going through. But I think through our lives and activism, we have a conversation with academia that at times can be uncomfortable, but where we prioritize our lives, what we're going through, what our communities needs. And to me, that's breaking the establishments. It's just guaranteeing our safety, our quality of life, even beyond politics of murder, politics of genocide, even beyond invisibility. We are here and we're showing ourselves in our true identity, in our true form. And some of us can have the luxury of having a community, some of us don't. So we're trying to reach out to those people and putting their lives out there, and not just talking and for them, but just showing the pieces of what society we have built. And to me, that's breaking the establishment.
Thank you, Dania. Jimena, do you want to share your perspective, please?
I think of gender as a colonial imposition, and I think that it has informed everything from the economy to the government to academia. So I think that transness or existing outside the gender binary is a challenge to all this. And letting gender be free is a challenge to 500 years of colonial violence. I think that's what breaking the establishment means to me. Although I myself don't really, I myself identify as non-binary, because I also find that to be not cisgender, to be transgender, but dedicated to the binary is still very damaging. So I think that it's also very important to acknowledge that it's not about just about being trans, but about expanding what gender is.
You know what? I really liked what I heard from Dania once again. Well, from all of you, but in Dania's case, when she mentioned something about the interplay between the conversation between academia and the experience of being trans or whatnot. I think more or less that's what you alluded to, Dania. And in my experience with the community, with community work, with activism, I've really been turned off sometimes by some who come to the community through academia, who maybe may call themselves trans, but they just don't have the experience of many, out there in the community who are struggling. And I really appreciate those who come from academia. They've studied, and that's very valuable. But I always emphasize that just having the experience in no way is less important than the academic experience. And so, there's that interplay there. And I think that those who do come from academia should be mindful that the trans experience began with the experience. The academic understanding of it came afterwards over time, and it's still, coming into play. And the other thing that Jimena mentioned, that she identifies as non-binary, that being binary can be so damaging, something like that. You said, Jimena. I totally identify with that. Right now, I identify as a non-binary trans woman. I'm just not totally passable. Never have been. and I've had to live with that and be happy with that. And as I say, right now it's non-binary trans women. In the future, with new technologies, I don't know what I'll be. But so I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Okay. So another question that I have on the list, which Francisco kind of helped to establish this list. Um, who has guided or supported you in your identity as a trans-Latinx person, and how did they do it? Natasha, do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yes. Growing up, I grew in a really religious family and I always attended religious schools. So I never had a trans person in my life that I could see and admire. So when I would watch this activist here in Puerto Rico called Ivana Fred on the news, I always felt so inspired by her. And when I was older, when I started going to college, I got involved in the queer nightlife and I started going to drag shows. And my favorite drag queen has always been this trans woman called Ali Love. And I remember she would always like make sure I was okay. She would always talk to me. I would go to these parties and I didn't know anyone, and she would be the one person to talk to me. Even though she was performing, she would always like find this moment to talk to me. So like people like them that are like visible and are always doing important things inside the community really helped me find myself. Later on, when I lived in Mexico, I started making trans friends, and that's where I really started to blossom as a trans woman. And I started to like know other people with experiences similar to mine. And when I came back to Puerto Rico, I had so much fire to like work for the community, to be visible so that other kids that maybe don't have a reference of a trans person might see a reference in me. And I started surrounding myself with the people I used to admire. Now I can call Adi Love my friend. Ivana Fred has also supported me a lot. And I feel like it's really important having people that are visible so queer kids can have a reference to what they can be when they grow up, like what they can become, and that maybe all those times of repressions is not all your like, it's not all that's there, that you can go past that and actually fulfill all your dreams.
Thank you, Natasha. Danya, has there been somebody in your life that's been important and helpful to you in your transition or with your identity?
Yeah, a whole lot of people. I would say my Black queer community, my drag kings, my drag queens, my sex workers, um, our mothers from the community have always been there to support us, not just mentally, but literally, materially, giving us houses to live in, giving us food to be where we at. So I would say our community is full of people like Tacha, like Adi, like Ivana, like Karina Torres, like Kerry John Santiago, like Max Vega, Kesia Ramos, a lot of people that are doing like groundwork for our queer people and our queer lives now. Not for yesterday, for tomorrow, but right now. How are you? What do you need? Where you at? And how can we support each other? Because it's not easy to be a Black queer kid in our colony where there's no, as Tasha was saying, there's no, we have maybe like two. I remember the first trans woman I saw on TV was what's her name, Tasha? The blonde, beautiful one,
Barbie Delgado.
Barbie Delgado,
Yeah.
and oh, I can't remember her name right now. I can't believe it.
Luisa
The,
Macona.
no, the one that was en el show de Ahora Podemos Hablar, que es bien controversial.
Mm, I don't remember her.
Oh, yeah, but I can't remember her name, but she was the first trans woman on TV and talking about her experience. And then Ivana Fred came as a voice from activism, just telling her story. But we don't have any other kind of representation. We don't have Black queer people on TV. We don't have Black trans men anywhere where we can see on TV or any or representation. So my community has been the one that has supported me and that has shown me how can we, not how can we live, how we need to live, what we deserve, and where we need to go from here. So I would say my community in the south of Puerto Rico also has been very supportive, especially through the terremotos and everything. We organize a Brigada Queer to help people from the south, but especially Black queer people, sex workers from the south. So it was a very beautiful experience just to see them and help them, because most of them didn't get any help, not even to the hurricane, because FEMA didn't help them because they were discriminated for being trans people, and they were openly discriminated. And our local government doesn't even recognize us, doesn't even mention our names in the new civil code that they passed to take away half of the rights we have. So that's the country we live in. So we have to make ourselves visible within our communities, within our activism. And I would say my community has been the one that has shown me the way, the good and the bad, because they have put me in place when I have been needed to be, you know, a better person for my community. And I truly appreciate that accountability process.
Thank you, Dania. It's good that you're sharing that, because those are the things that oftentimes you don't see. Thank you. Jimena, do you want to share about somebody important to you that's been helpful with you and your identity?
Yeah, no. The reality is I didn't have anyone well until I was like 20, which is like when I started coming out. And even then it was like counselors at the LGBTQ center in New York City, because I had no idea where to go in New Jersey, so I had to like travel cross state. And even after that, I just felt like I was so pulled left and right by work and school that I wasn't able to build community. It wasn't until I started 4 years of a 4-year school, which was my goal ultimately, was like, I'm gonna go to a 4-year school because that's probably the only way I'm gonna like be able to hang out and make trans friends. Because I just didn't have anyone else. But it was really organizing that introduced me to like all my trans friends now. It wasn't even, I mean, no, it wasn't even school. School, all the trans people were so white and not connected to the rest of the world. And I was like, okay, so clearly like this was all hyped up. I need to look elsewhere. And I think organizing definitely was the kind of place. But I'm so new. I honestly feel like I'm so new to like the concept of like, you know, just taking care of each other, caring for each other. I wish it wasn't like that. But I also feel like there's a lot of people who, and I'll be honest, in those years before I found community, I was seeking white acceptance more than anything. I was seeking access to white spaces, white party spaces. Never looked at like communities that really mutually cared for each other. Now I do.
Okay, thank you, Jimena. Also, I'm going to say something. Dania, I apologize. I just realized that you go by they, them, their pronouns. Okay, I was just reminded of that. So sorry. No disrespect meant it. I was just a little bit unaware. Okay. And as for me, who may have been supportive of me back in my process, back in the mid-'80s when I began, or even before, well, not my family. I had the experience of being expulsed from home. I mean, my mother and dad loved me; they gave me my life, but they didn't understand me, and I didn't fit in. and I grew up in LA, but I wound up in Tijuana with my grandmother. And back then, when you were trans, just for walking as trans or just being trans, the police would pick you up and lock you up. And I experienced that on quite a few occasions in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And, you know, you're left wondering, what the heck? You know, I didn't do anything wrong, but that's the way it was. They'd release you after a day or two. And really uncomfortable. And you know, you'd be angry about that. And, you know, I did experience discrimination on the job in San Diego, in Tijuana, the streets too, of course. The cops, as I mentioned. I didn't have the support of my biological family, but as Dania said, once again, I keep referring back to her and her experience. um, where I found the support, where I found the love, flawed love, I'll say, but nonetheless good love, was from my fellow trans community. I say flawed because, we're friends to each other and sometimes frenemies. There's a little bit of everything in the community. Um, but nonetheless, that's where I found support. That's where I found people who understood my experience. That's where I was able to be supportive of. And back then, you didn't see trans people at the university, not openly trans people. The ones that I knew were all sex workers. Unfortunately, some were on drugs. Not all, but some. And things, marginalized experiences. Yet that's where I found the love and support that I needed for my experience as a trans woman.
I like to comment on what Jimena said about it being like kind of hard to like make trans friends or find a place where you can meet trans people and people who can relate to your experience. Like, I feel that a lot of people feel that way, and it's really hard to like get in contact with other trans people that are like living the same experiences as you. And sometimes even inside the same trans community, there's a lot of internalized transphobia if you're not passing enough, if you don't go by like the binary like stereotypes that people expect a trans person to look like or want to achieve. You receive a lot of hate, and it's hard to fit in even inside the trans community. So that's why I decided that we had to work to make this better, and I started like a support group for trans people to be able to meet each other in a safe environment, because I know how difficult it is to find other people that can relate to your experience. And I think it's really important for us to start building community and to reach out to other people that might be experiencing the same things we are.
Okay. Thank you, Natasha. Somebody else have any comment to share?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Jimena too, in a sense where we're talking about not relating to anybody or not knowing anybody until we're 20 something and waiting to have to be out of your home. I have experienced the same thing, and even when I went outside, I felt that same need of approval and that hunger for people to accept me, for to feel part of a community. and and in, and through that process I received so much violence that it truly shaped my whole life, in a sense that where I was determined that nobody was going to live through this. Whenever we're talking in a sense of organizing, especially in Puerto Rico, in this anti-colonial movement, this in the student movement, um, and and that experience shaped my whole life, in a sense where I couldn't even understand how much violence it was inflicted upon me while I was trying to liberate myself. And through work for a community that even recognized me and that didn't even see me as somebody. And I didn't even know anything about self-care, anything about, um, taking time for yourself, or exploring your gender identity, because those were things that were going to be solved whenever socialism came, whenever colonialism ended. And in the meantime, I'm feeling like shit. So I totally relate to that, and the power that community has in healing not only that generational trauma that precedes us and that we carry within ourselves and within our blood, but that intragenerational trauma that we inflict upon ourselves, and that is expected total silence and acceptance from our community. So I totally relate to that experience, and I hope that whenever you are and whatever you're doing, everything is moving towards better system of accountability and self-care.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Um,
Donnie.
I wanted to add that the coquille in the back is giving me life. I think that it's frankly, like the y'all talking about how you build community, and in particular, like, giving folks housing, it makes me feel as though like um I've pursued the wrong paths for my community. Um, because I've been so focused on working in academia, and um I think that like you saying that it wasn't until you left your house that you also could kind of experience the same thing. I think that that means a lot because um I keep forgetting that everyone just has kind of like somebody to like, not, I don't know, maybe teens have that now. I'm sure y'all are who are showing up for the teens now. It's really nice to hear that because like I, I still in certain ways like I'm just like adjacent to trans organizing because I'm so focused on whether it's my status or just like working, sharing.
Okay, thank you, Jimena. Okay, the next question, Natasha, going in order. Um, what do you foresee as to the future or for the future of the Trans-Latinx community?
It's a difficult question because I try to have hope, but right now in Puerto Rico we're seeing a lot of violence, and not only in Puerto Rico, around the world, towards trans people, especially trans people of color. And it's it just sometimes I don't feel much hope for things getting better. But then I remember there's a lot of people like all of you that are working to build a better place for us to live in and to try to like fix what's been broken for so long. And I try to think about like a stronger community and making the changes that need to be done. I'm working really hard to like make Puerto Rico a better place for trans people. I've been talking to like people who are aspiring to be in like the politics here and be the governor. Last Friday, I was talking with one of the candidates, Alexandra Luga, Romanuel Natal. So we're trying to like make these people know that we're trans, that we're here, that we need to be listened to, that things need to change. And I like to think they're listening, but we never know what's in cisgender people's minds when we're talking about these issues. So um like I always feel that when people that have power are listening to us, it's just for their benefit, not to actually help us. And that's what's in my mind all the time. I know that shouldn't be my mindset, but I just, that's what I think, and it's really hard for me to trust that things are gonna change. But like we're working for it to change, and hopefully the people that come after us will have a better place to live in.
I take Tasha's words and roll with it, and I will say that the future is here, is now, is today, is what we're doing right now. Because we're not just trying to build up for tomorrow, we're trying to build up for today, for the current trans people living the earth everywhere today. So, and I might get a little bit emotional because I always do. I'm an Aquarius. So, but I wrote in my notebook, a world without borders. That's what I think about Trans-Latinx future. And it makes me emotional because earlier Jimena said like, yeah, but there's some people that are not so eager about voting, you know, because they can vote because they're immigrants, because of their particular reality within an imperialist system. So to me, those words become even more like present, even more important, even more aware of realities that goes beyond our colony. And I would say that that's what I think Trans-Latinx future is. It's a world without borders. It's beyond politics of representation to politics of inclusion to politics, of power to the people, of politics of moving beyond the capitalist system, of politics of moving beyond slavery, of moving beyond the monopoly of not only power but the economy. And I think that's the future of Trans-Latinx. And it's not only what we need to say with our mouths, because people expect a beautiful speech with trans people. It's what we're doing right now. So that's what we're doing. We're building that future. Even if we don't talk about it like, yeah, we're anti-capitalist, or we don't have these big words for everybody. That's what we're doing right now. That's the world we're building. And I think that just being here with you and meeting Jimena has been to me amazing, and it's given me more awareness of our realities. So to me, the future is here, is now, is in these conversations that move beyond the expectations of numbers, of statistics, of these horror stories about trans people, and moving beyond what we're doing, how beautiful we are, how capable we are, of the amazing things we're doing, and about how we heal and how we made it to here, and that we are not where we might be the exception, you know, but we are building a future where this is our reality and this is our common day to day, and we're talking about other things that are not just the murder of trans people around the world.
Thank you, Dania. Jimena, any thoughts as to the future of the Trans-Latinx community?
Certainly to create a future certainly has to challenge white supremacist systems. So I think the future is Black led for sure, and I think that means that everyone who isn't Black has to interrogate their positioning in history, because moving forward, the less they know about their positioning in history and their responsibility, the more they're going to get in the way. So I feel like definitely a lot of intra-community education, political education, because what I experience as an undocumented person here in this country where the elections are always treated as a solution is that, like Natasha said, like when they talk to you is because it benefits them. And that's been the case every single time. So I've been thinking much more about what can there be done outside of voting, outside of imperialist systems. I think that that the pandemic has demonstrated to people that mutual aid doesn't have to be like mutual aid is possible with everybody at home, which means that like we can reach out farther than we thought we did before, and everybody got a crash course on like helping people that are far away. And I think that's going to become much more crucial, especially because listen, like the US is on decline, and you know, yes, it may be marginally safer than other countries, but I think it's about like creating a world where like folks don't have to flee their homes, where the heroes aren't in the US giving back. The heroes are like at home. I feel that, well, at least from just the people who get here, there's this perception of like everything's better, and like I said, this country's in decline. It's in the brink of civil war. And so, yeah, it's like, I would just wish people didn't have to flee their homes.
This is my perspective, but it also has to do with what I've heard from the three of you. First, with what Natasha was saying about she's wary when cis people come and ask for, you know, to be supportive, but, you know, she's wondering about their agenda. That's been my experience with cis and gay lesbian people, cis gay lesbian people and cis straight people. Sometimes even with other trans people. Oops. Because sometimes I felt like I was used or tokenized. And so I don't think it's bad to, you know, have some kind of collaboration with cis or cis gay lesbian or cis straight people. I don't think it's bad, or even other trans people. But I think that it's got to be on an equal footing. And if it's a trans themed project and they're not trans, then the trans people should be the dominant partners or the stronger partners, or their voice should be strong and respected. And, and so one of the things I've learned over the years is to watch out for hidden agendas. If somebody comes, at me with an idea and they're being respectful, great. If not, and that's what I wind up seeing, I really get turned off. And as for what Dania and Jimena were saying, Dania was saying something about a world without borders. Yes. I've lived on both sides of an international border where there's lots of violence, not just physical violence, but also, how do you call it? Social violence, families being separated, sometimes not being treated respectfully when you're crossing the border. So many different things. And so that's one thing that's important to me. There's a lot of work to do there, and that's related a bit to what Jimena was sharing about critiquing the system, about decolonization. That involves a lot of thought, a lot of how would you say that, destructuralizing, and so that's a lot of work cut out for us. And I really connect to those things that the three of you are sharing. So that's my perspective. And
I wanted to add something.
Yes.
Adding on top of what the pandemic has taught us about sharing funds, I think that for trans organizers on the ground, folks have to start thinking of the nonprofit world as part of the state. And that when stories become very visible, such as Alexandra, I believe, in Puerto Rico. Alexa.
Yeah.
I think that there needs to be an intentional push for people who want to donate to not give to big organizations, particularly those hosted in the United States. GLAAD, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, even the ACLU, they're doing nothing for anyone outside the United States. And I know that happens a lot, especially when a story gets big here, is that the money all goes to them. And it's like, let's put money in the pockets, straight into the pockets of people who need it.
Yeah, I wanted to add real quick, to the point of Tacha was talking about how people in power just want to have the approval of trans people. Right now, we have an opportunity to have a segment in a radio show and an online radio show. And we're trying to do a cover of the primaries in Puerto Rico. And one of the things we try to do in order to put those discourses into question is put trans people from the Pueblo de Ponce, which is the town we are interviewing the candidates, to tell the stories, how trans people live in Ponce for real. So I think that's one of the ways where we can talk to power instead of maybe asking them for whatever they want to say, telling our stories, how we living in Ponce. If you say that trans people in Ponce have access to hormones, well, there's three trans women in Ponce saying that there's no access to hormones. There are three trans people saying that they have experienced violence from police. So what are you going to do about it? So that's one of the things that we're trying to do right now in media, is just put in the voices of trans people in Puerto Rico, not mediating through a lens of this tragic story or this of what happened to you, but in the sense of how do you want to put your political power to work? Where do you want to invest your political power, your story, your life into? And it has been a beautiful experience for us, just giving these women the microphone. Is amazing to see the power that they have, how clear the future they have just in front of them. And I think we have much to learn from our communities. And there was other thing that I wanted to say, but I totally forgot, so I'm sorry.
I like to comment too, also on what Jimena said about putting the money in trans people's pockets. I think that's really important because sometimes these big organizations do nothing for us, and the people who really need the help don't receive it. So, my personal experience is every time I try to raise money for some cause or a person, the money goes directly to the person and not to any organization. I always try to be transparent and like show everybody, but it's always gonna go to the person that's in need. And it's kind of sad that we as trans people are the ones that are helping other trans people to like, because sometimes I need help too, but like I know I'm privileged and other people are in going through much harder struggles, and I get out of my way to help other people when I know there's a lot of cisgender people that could be helping us, putting the money in our pockets, because that's what at the end of the day we need. Without money, we don't have access to hormones, healthcare, food, housing. So I think it's really important for people to be aware that if you're not helping a trans person economically, you're not really doing that much.
Thank you, Natasha. Okay, so I guess I can go to the last question. And this will be for you first, Natasha. What would you like to share with the trans Latinx community around the world?
As a trans Latinx woman, I know it's hard living in a society with so much machismo and the violence that we get all the time. But my advice to everyone is to make community. That's the most important thing. To go find other trans people, surround yourself with other trans people, and that can help you grow, feel more secure. I've never felt more secure than when I'm with a bunch of trans women going into a cis heteronormative setting. I feel power because I know I'm not alone and there's other people like me in the same space, and we're making people question a lot of things. And I think that united, we're stronger, that we need to start breaking a lot of barriers we've put within inside our community, and we need to start checking our privileges, because even if we're trans, we can have privileges and we have to acknowledge them. I have light skin. I have a lot of privilege that maybe people with dark skin don't have. So we have to acknowledge the privileges and all the things that we can use to help other people within our community, because if we're not using our privilege to good, then like we're not really doing anything to better our community. So we need to start working on our community and making our community a safer space for everyone, and learning and deconstruyéndonos. Like we need to get rid of everything that has been taught to us that doesn't really serve any good.
I want to start saying that I'm so thankful that I come after Natasha, because I just ride the wave that she's creating, because I totally agree with everything she says. That the hard conversations we need to have within our communities, and I would say to our trans Latinx community that we hear, that we queer, that in Puerto Rico there's a big community trying to organize themselves, not trying, organizing themselves, trying to create a sustainable economic base for our community, which is the project that I work with. That's our main goal. We want to create an economic sustainable platform for our communities, and that even though times are weird right now, we are going to make it. And we're not going to make it because it's a prophecy or because it's destiny, it's because we have been here forever. So we're going to be here forever. So this fight that we're doing is a constant fight for our lives that has been gone beyond us, and that we are here. And I want to express my whole appreciation that we're here because of those generations that came before us, that did the fight for us, and that we're continuing that fight, and that trans people has always been here, that Black people has always been here, and that our value is not even a question of which we have. And we have power in our voices, and our stories need to be at the front of every campaign, of every news, of every talk show, of every community conversation that we have. And in the other side, the other advice I wanted to give to the Black queer community and our Trans-Latinx community is to be aware of our online activity, to be aware of our cybersecurity right now, especially in times of COVID, in the ways we interact with internet. So I would exhortar to Trans-Latinx people that study ways that they can make themselves safer online. To me, I think it's a very important subject right now, and to support the grassroots movements, not just giving a like, a share, but just truly joining a movement if you can, giving a call if you can, and that we are making ourselves available here, making ourselves visible, and we know the weight that carries within us, but we're not trying to represent a whole community. We're trying to tell our stories, and how can we connect through our stories. And that's what I would say to the Latinx community, that we are diverse, and that we hear that in Puerto Rico, you have a home, that we're fighting to make our country free and safer for all of us, and that know that you can count on us, that we have each other.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost that your gender's for you. I think that especially when I first started transitioning, like, my gender was not for me. My gender was for everyone else. Especially, my gender was to attract people sexually. And I realized there's so much more to gender, and so much more that I wanted out of gender. And I think that the reason that it was like that at first was because of my dedication to the binary. So I think that trans folks do have to do that work, unleashing the binary. You can be trans and bisexual. You can be non-binary and pansexual. We gotta just stop expecting everybody to transition and be straight. That's boring. And then I would say, yeah, like, seek a community. When I think back of all the times that I'm so grateful to have been around queer people, it probably started with me lying to my parents about where I was going and sneaking it off to Pride. And I think, like, take those risks, do what you can to put yourself in those spaces, as long as they're safe, because they're worth it, especially if you feel as though you're not surrounded by the community already. You got to reach out there, reach back.
With that said, that's all the time that we have. Thank you everyone for joining us. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on all our social media outlets and podcast platforms at Latin_entertainment, and website where we center the Latin American diaspora on Abya at www.latinentertainment.org. Tune in next week for another episode of Conversamos.
Yeah, yo, is it that wrong? I'm making a song, I'm taking it back for the platform that I formed. Music's helping me transform. I run the reservoir, the predator.